Well, the Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pandor, will host a counterpart from the BRICS member countries and a special guest tomorrow in Cape Town. This forms part of the preparations for the Heads of State and Government Summit that will take place in August in Johannesburg. For more on this, we are joined by SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. Good morning. Thank you so much for making time for some of the important issues of this meeting. Is it a meeting ahead of the summit? And also speaking about the logistics, the big one is, of course, President Vladimir Putin and whether or not he'd be attending.
Yes, of course, as you are aware that the Foreign Affairs Minister, the chief diplomat of the Russian Federation, is already on the continent. He went to Kenya, he went to Burundi. He is now in Mozambique and he will be arriving in South Africa later today. And of course, we'll get a clearer sense whether President Vladimir Putin will be coming to South Africaってthe invitation was extended to him. So we don't know behind the scenes what are the discussions. As you heard this week when I spoke to the former South African President, former President Thabo Mbeki, saying that the better way to handle this is to ensure that you have it virtual, or if it's in person, of course it must be in another country. But South Africa must still chair this meeting because it is South Africa's turn, and therefore we don't know. But of course, high on the agenda will be trade relations between or amongst BRICS member countries, and the issue of currency, the dollar as international trading currency, will come under spotlight.
And we're speaking about that as well. New members who want to join, including the likes of Saudi Arabia. I think Turkey has also indicated an interest in joining BRICS. But has all of this have to do with the hegemony of the dollar?
Yes, of course, but also doing away with unipolar world to ensure that you have a multipolar world. Part of the geopolitics that we are seeing since COVID-19, we saw that happening, that movement where countries were saying, us in the South, we must have a voice, we must be heard. And of course, it was strengthened by the war in Ukraine, where you had BRICS member countries rallying behind Russia, a member country, and many other countries, particularly the non-aligned movement member countries and the developing countries, saying that United States of America and North Atlantic Treaty Organization or most of the European countries cannot dictate how the world should conduct its business. And this is happening. And of course, then it brings the issue of trade and investment. And many are saying because of the sanctions that were imposed on Russia, we cannot continue to use a dollar. Now you have a situation where the United States of America has announced secondary sanctions, and now Europe is also discussing how they are going to punish countries that are doing business with Russia. That is the implementation of the secondary.
And we've also seen how sensitive the dollar is and how sensitive the rand is to the dollar after that press briefing by the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, Brickety, that is Ambassador Brickety. The president has now announced that an inquiry will be set up, and that inquiry will be chaired by Judge Mujapilo. But then the issue is that they've got 6 weeks to investigate, 2 weeks then to hand over the report to the president, which means about 2 months. And within that 2 months, that will just be ahead of the BRICS summit. What do you think would happen there?
I think when you listen to those who have a know-how, for example, a former head of state like Thabo Mbeki, who has dealt with issues of arms trade as head of state, he pointed out to this committee that the president also spoke about, and many other people have touched on it, that in terms of arms sales in South Africa, the rules and regulations and the laws are very tight. And therefore, I think to get information and get to the bottom of the role of the state will be easy. But don't rule out the fact that it might be private sector, that is companies that are doing business on this kind of trade. And there you're talking about the Russian oligarch.
But using a naval, a military
That's
naval
where
port,
the issue will be, to say perhaps did they use a naval base, and therefore you must get chief of navy and also the person who's the head of that base to get information. And I think it's not, it can't take a long time, but as pointed out by the former South African president, that it is important to have a commission so that you don't have a situation where those who are aggrieved are saying government, it is just a cover up.
Thank you so much for your time. International Affairs News Editor there, Sophie Mokoena. Thank you so much for your time.